The year was 9042. The world was on fire and the Second World War had entered a phase where secrecy, cunning, and outright deception were as deadly as bullets and bombs. The British were desperate. Nazi Germany was tightening its grip on Europe, and every shipping lane mattered. Somewhere far from the front lines, in the quiet waters of the Spanish-controlled island of Fernando Po, off the coast of West Africa, a handful of unassuming ships sat at anchor. But these weren't just any ships. They were Axis-controlled vessels suspected of carrying crucial supplies, intelligence, and possibly weapons that could alter the course of the war. Capturing them could tilt the balance. Failing could spark a diplomatic firestorm. This was the backdrop for one of the most daring and little-known Black Ops missions of World War II, Operation Postmaster. It wasn't a grand naval battle with battleships blasting away, nor was it a paratrooper drop into enemy territory. This was a covert, almost surgical strike, planned in whispers, executed in shadows, and wrapped in layers of deception so deep that even the British government wasn't entirely sure it wanted to admit it ever happened. And yet, in the dead of night, a small team of commandos risked everything to pull it off. The operation was the brainchild of Britain's Special Operations Executive, or SOE, the shadowy ministry of ungentlemanly warfare that Winston Churchill had unleashed to set Europe ablaze. The mission sounded deceptively simple. Sail into the harbor at Fernando Po, board 3 specific ships, cut their anchors and tow them out to sea under cover of darkness. But there was a catch. Fernando Po was under neutral Spanish control. Any overt military action could drag Spain, which had so far stayed out of the war, into Hitler's camp. That meant no uniforms, no open gunfights, and no evidence pointing back to Britain. If caught, the commandos would be labeled pirates, stripped of all legal protection, and likely executed. The target list included the Italian merchant ship Duchessa d'Aosta and 2 German tugboats, Likomba and Bibundi. Intelligence suggested these vessels weren't just carrying mundane cargo, they might be transporting materials vital to the Axis war effort, along with highly sensitive documents. Losing them would hurt Hitler and Mussolini more than any bombing run in the region could. Here's where the story takes a sharp turn into cloak and dagger territory. To get their team close enough without arousing suspicion, the SOE decided to disguise the mission as a civilian social outing. The operatives would pose as guests attending a floating cocktail party on a nearby vessel. This wasn't just for show. Invites were sent, alcohol was loaded aboard, and music was prepared to create the perfect cover. While the Spanish authorities thought the British sailors were drinking and dancing the night away, the real action would unfold silently in the harbor. The team chosen for this mission was as unconventional as the plan itself. Leading them was Major Gustavus Goose Marchphillips, a man described as equal parts adventurer and madman, with a reputation for taking risks no sane commander would consider. Alongside him was the equally bold Geoffrey Appleyard, plus a handful of sailors, engineers, and mechanics who could improvise under pressure. They had no margin for error. If one rope jammed, if one guard looked the wrong way, or if one engine refused to start, the entire mission could collapse. January 14, 1942 arrived, and the harbor at Fernando Po seemed calm, almost sleepy. Under the cover of the cocktail party, the British team quietly slipped into small boats and rowed toward their targets. The darkness was their greatest ally, masking their approach. But here's the first twist. When they reached the ships, they discovered the crews were still aboard and awake. Neutral port or not, the Axis sailors weren't taking chances. The commandos had to act fast and without noise. Climbing aboard the Duchessa d'Aosta, they moved like ghosts, overpowering the crew with silenced weapons and sheer surprise. No gunfire rang out, only muffled thuds, the creak of deck boards, and the whispered commands of Marchphillips directing his men. Within minutes, they had control of the vessel. Meanwhile, another team secured the tugboats. The anchors were cut and tow lines were thrown to the waiting British tugs positioned just outside the harbor. Here's where the operation's tension hit a breaking point. As the captured ships began to move, the harbor stirred. Spanish officials noticed the commotion and began scrambling toward the docks. Had they been just a few minutes earlier, the British might have found themselves in a firefight with neutral forces. A diplomatic disaster that could have changed the course of the war. But by the time the authorities grasped what was happening, the ships were already slipping into open water, their silhouettes fading into the African night. By dawn, the captured vessels were firmly in Allied hands. The operation had been a complete success. No British casualties, 3 valuable enemy ships seized, and not a single trace left pointing directly to the SOE. The official story fed to the press and Spanish authorities painted it as an unexplained disappearance, with the British denying any involvement. Behind closed doors, however, Churchill and the SOE celebrated. Operation Postmaster had proven that small, precise Black Ops missions could achieve strategic results without massive battles or heavy casualties. The aftermath was equally fascinating. The intelligence gathered from the seized ships reportedly included valuable shipping codes and supply details, disrupting Axis movements in the Atlantic. The raid also sent a chilling message to the Axis powers. Nowhere, not even in a neutral port, was truly safe from Allied reach. And for the SOE, it became a blueprint for future daring raids, from sabotage missions in Europe to clandestine operations in Asia. But perhaps the most dramatic part of Operation Postmaster isn't just its success, it's the razor-thin margin between triumph and catastrophe. If a single Spanish official had spotted the raiding party too soon, or if one of the Axis crews had fought back loudly enough, Britain could have been accused of violating neutral territory and dragging another country into war. The mission was a gamble, and like all great gambles, it paid off because of a mix of planning, audacity, and sheer luck. In the grand tapestry of World War II, Operation Postmaster might seem like a footnote compared to D-Day or the Battle of Britain. But for the men who carried it out, it was proof that courage and creativity could punch far above their weight. It was a reminder that wars aren't just won on the front lines. They're also decided in the shadows. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell.